Session's over, the campaigns are underway, and we are joined by Senator Dave Schatz, the President of the Senate, freshly back from Jefferson City, signing all the bills going to the governor's desk.
Yes, that is correct, Scott. Appreciate it. Glad to be here. So get session over with, and now we get back to business.
In any normal world, we'd be talking first about all the bills that you just signed to send on to the governor. In this situation, we have the COVID crisis that's still hitting parts of the state. Governor Parson extended his orders. The question I have for you is, so Franklin County, it opened up. Even your presiding commissioner went on television the Saturday before and said, come to Franklin County, we're open.
Sure.
I actually was driving back through and I saw some folks, that I believe some St. Louis folks took him up on that and came to Franklin County. In the last week, you've had one new case. You've had 139 overall, only 14 now. There were predictions of doom and gloom going to hit Franklin County. Everyone was going to die. Well, actually, no, that's not the case in Franklin County.
No, again, when you look at the numbers, they haven't proved out to the concerns, and I still think there are valid reasons to be concerned. But right now, again, when you look at the numbers that are out there right now, the reality is could be much ado about nothing when it comes to Franklin County.
When I think of people in state government that have a level head, run a cool engine, that know how to make logical decisions, you're one of the people I think of, a business background, experience in the House. I spent a lot of this week in southern Missouri. I wonder if there's not a problem with continuing to extend phases as the governor did and all the things you're being told. In most of these counties, there's really no pandemic. And if there is a pandemic, if this has went on since St. Patrick's Day, I worry maybe the government loses some credibility with people if they're constantly telling them, don't go out, don't go out, don't go out. There's no people sick in their community, and then if there is a pandemic, they might not believe you.
Yeah, that may be a crying wolf at some point in time, and I think as evidence of what we've seen maybe over the weekend, and as I was in Franklin County, prior to Memorial Day weekend, and seeing people beginning to move about, it appeared that obviously people are ready to move on. I think a lot of people are tired of the situation and COVID-19, and so they're ready to move on. And again, the numbers, obviously when they see the numbers, it's concerning for them to say, is this really something that we need to be concerned about? I do think there are valid reasons to be concerned. The governor extending the order to the 15th, I think may be partly because to see, okay, what does occur? If a couple of weeks from now, from Memorial Day weekend, we see a spike in cases and
Sure.
that happens, may be legitimate for him to move it out to June 15th to see what occurs. But I would say if nothing really becomes from that and we don't see an increase in cases, I think people are ready to continue to say, hey, it's time for us to get back to business as usual. And I think that's what people are looking for. And there are still people that have valid concerns, and I think that should be. That people that are susceptible to, have immune systems
Sure.
or nursing homes, they have to be careful. But I think that the average everyday person that says, hey, I'm willing to take some risks, there's a risk associated with me coming down here today and getting on the interstate. And so I have to do that every day. And so I think we're hearing a lot from those folks, and they're ready to move on.
So there was a lot of predictions when the governor opened up. It's too soon, bad, bad, bad. I don't think, honestly, anybody can really look at the data and say those predictions have come true. I can't imagine. I've seen Missourians, there was a poll come out, approved 2-1 of the governor's handling of this. I think he's been very wise when he's kept the response local. St. Louis has a different situation than St. Clair County. But I do believe if you extend this much farther, you run the risk of people. I mean, I think people are moving on regardless of what the government says. You hate to say that if you continue to do this in places where this isn't a problem, are you going to be able to get their attention if there is a problem?
If there is, yeah. No, I think that's a valid point. I respect what the governor's done up to this point. I think he's handled
impossible job.
It is an impossible job because there are people out there that think he hasn't gone far enough. There's people that think he's gone too far, and so you got to try to find a way to find a way to some middle ground there. And I think he's done a pretty good job of saying, hey, we're going to try to leave it to as much common sense as possible, allowing some of the local health ordinance people to engage. And so you're seeing a patchwork of different requirements in certain areas across the state. But like I said, there's places, that this is when there's no fear at all when there's not cases. And these people are saying, why are we doing this? Why are we putting ourselves through this exercise when the risks are so low that it appears that's where we're at right now.
Speaking of some people saying you went too far and some people saying you didn't go far enough, let's talk about session. Tort reform bill has to be the top accomplishment of the Republicans. It was passed. Compromise bill, but it's probably the biggest tort reform bill in the history of Missouri.
Again, I think, as we took on some tort issues last year, we were able to get joiner and venue across the finish line last year. Was the #1 top priority of the business community last year that we took that on. This year it was punitives, and we made it a point to get to that early. And I think the fact that the Senate was able to put that as a priority in the beginning of the year, work through the process and get that accomplished, and get it over to the House, put us in positions where we could get that taken care of, and the House passed it in the final week. Had we not put that work in, seeing the circumstances that occurred in March, that bill wouldn't have been accomplished. And so I was very pleased that we took that as a priority and got that done and put that issue to bed. And I think that, again, working with Senator Lukemeyer, Senator White in that room, having them and having their expertise, and understanding, because of their law background, was invaluable for us and able to get navigate and negotiate through there. But again, I think that was one of the signature things that as we were ending up in this COVID environment, I was hoping that we were able to get that accomplished. It's like I would not want to see the work that we put into that go by the wayside in this shortened session that we ultimately ended up serving in.
Well, it's the kind of deal, you may never get that deal again. I mean, it was a very good deal
Sure.
on the tort reform side.
And I think that there were people that as that went over to the House, they were looking to try to get another bite at the apple. And so there was a time when that could have been jeopardized if that bill comes back to the Senate in a shortened window and a funnel that happens in the final weeks of session. It wouldn't be very hard for that bill to have died, on the last few days, at the hands of people that wanted to have another bite at that. So I was glad that the House took the bill that we had passed and truly agreed and finally passed that, and now obviously onto the governor's desk.
So you put Clean Missouri back on the ballot.
Yes.
I don't know. I tend to think that it's going to be an uphill slog to pass that. But it went back on, I guess, as a November issue now.
Sure. Well, I think it is. I think at best, my position on this was this. He says it's kind of like you can't win if you don't play. We
Sure.
can't, if the issue is not going to be put on the ballot, obviously we know there's challenges associated with that, but unless we have an issue on the ballot, we're not going to get the opportunity to have people to take a look at it or potentially find the funding in order to get that bill passed.
A question I've asked on this show, is there right now a commitment from any major donor to really put serious money,
I don't
money
think
into
that
this?
we have that necessarily, but I think that we're going to have to search for those individuals. I think those people are out there that obviously have concerns. The portion of the redistricting issue of why we think we needed to go back to the voters and explain that to them, I think they're as concerned as we are, and so I think that we'll see some resources come in behind that issue, and ultimately I think we'll try to fund a campaign that will give the voters an opportunity to make that decision.
So if it doesn't pass, you're going to be sending a list of people from the auditor, correct, of a demographer to draw these districts. I mean, I assume that no decision is made and the auditor just picks this map drawer.
That has landed in the responsibility of the floor leader to be a part of that decision-making process. I know that they've had conversations. We had conversations with minority leadership as well as to those potential candidates, and so there's people that have made application for that. But again, it's not a big list of folks, and so I think at the end of the day, it probably comes back if this doesn't pass, the courts end up drawing the maps based upon a different criteria than what we've seen in the past. But the courts have drawn it most of the past few times anyway, and I think that will potentially would occur again.
Interesting. Let's talk about Medicaid.
Sure.
Medicaid expansion went on got the signatures to go on the ballot, and the governor moved it to August. I mean, anytime you say something's not political, it's kind of political, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, there's not most. This is what we're in.
Every governor does it.
Everything's political in this environment. And so, but I do think putting it on the August ballot, in the event that it does pass, will give us an opportunity to be able to look at the potential costs associated with it and how we prepare for that in the future. I think that it has the potential to be about $300 million to general revenue if it is fully implemented.
That you're out.
Yes,
That's part of the match. Once that comes out, I hope you come back and talk about it on This Week in Missouri Politics.
Oh sure, you bet. Once that happens, yeah.
We'll be right back with our Opinion Maker panel, the retiring Mike Lewis and the emerging Gene Evans after this.
Mike Parson served in law enforcement for 22 years. A former sheriff, Parson is tough on crime. Governor Parson is standing up for victims, investing in better mental health services, and cracking down on violent crime and drugs. Governor Parson's anti-crime initiatives have led to the arrests of hundreds of violent criminals and gang members. A former sheriff, a conservative, tough on crime governor. Mike Parson is making Missouri families safer.
All across Missouri, our new car and truck dealers are building strong local economies. When you buy a car or truck in Missouri, you're helping to support over 20,000 Missouri families who rely on the auto industry for good-paying local jobs. You're also helping fund our communities, schools, first responders, and our roads because dealers generate millions of dollars in tax revenue. Missouri's automobile dealers have been the foundation of our communities for generations and for generations to come. The Missouri Automobile Dealers Association.
Your energy needs are changing. That's why at Ameren, Missouri, we're not waiting on the future. We're building it with the Smart Energy Plan, advancing thousands of projects across the state, helping reduce emissions through cleaner energy sources, boost reliability with self-healing equipment, and better withstand storms with new composite poles. Moving Missouri forward and bringing us all a little closer together. That's energy at work. Ameren, Missouri.
Welcome back this week of Missouri Politics Opinion Maker Panel Time. We are joined by Gene Evans, the Executive Director of the Missouri Republican Party. Welcome back to the show.
Great to be here.
And Mike Lewis, the President of the Missouri AFL-CIO for one more month.
One more month, that's correct.
Thank you for finishing out strong and joining us here.
Thank you for inviting me and giving me a chance.
Mike Lewis, let's talk about the story everyone was buzzing about. There's a big, there's bars at the lake that have pools, and in America, some free people went to the bar themselves, and oh my God, the pearl clutching by the triggered class was triggered.
Well, but there's rules. That's the problem. The rules were broken, and people didn't. There was no self-control. There was no self-accountability. People know what scientists say, and they totally ignored it. And they went to the Lake of the Ozarks, to have fun, but not to stand on top of each other and not to do what they did. I mean, hundreds of people standing shoulder to shoulder. Were they allowed to drive 100 miles an hour on their way down there? No, because it's a law. Were they allowed to go jump off the bridge? No, because it's a law.
Well, there's not a lot of
these are
consequences if you break
guidelines.
that law. Gene Evans, look, these are free Americans, free Missourians in a free country that can do what they want at some point. Do you not have to stop with trying to boss people around all the time?
Well, breaking news that there's no self-control in parts of Lake of the Ozarks, including Coconuts or wherever that bar was. So
maybe that's why they go there.
that could be. And to his point, people do speed when they drive to Lake of the Ozarks. I'm sure many people broke the speed limit on the way down there, and not every single one of them was arrested. I mean, there is an opportunity here for people to show some self-control and some responsibility, and it's up to them. My understanding is that they took temperatures of folks coming in, and they did the things that they felt like they needed to do to keep people safe. But at the end of the day, people have to have self-control and take responsibility. If they don't, it could affect other people. If I decide to drive 100 miles an hour down the highway, I may not have an accident, but I may kill somebody, and then there are severe consequences both for them and for me.
So, Mike Lewis, you're from the St. Louis area, correct?
Correct.
I was at the lake this weekend, not at any of the poolside bars in the pool, but I have been there before, and I always see people from St. Louis and Kansas City there. And if they had a big test, if you're from St. Louis, yell. If you're from Kansas City, yell. And they yelled. The thing that people know that go there is the lake people don't go to those bars. Those are St. Louis and Kansas City folks. So you've had people in St. Louis and Kansas City, all these restrictions, all this preaching, all this lecturing, and yet they flock to the lake for freedom. At some point, is it not clear the preaching is not working?
It was very clear over the weekend that people chose to do what they wanted to do. And
now the Post-Dispatch wrote an editorial, I bet it's all fine. We need one more Post-Dispatch preachy editorial. I'm sure it's all under control.
Well, that's silly to even say, Scott Faughn.
I meant it as silly.
Yeah, but there are rules for a reason. Rules aren't necessarily there to protect the person committing not wearing a mask or not practicing social distances. The rules are there to protect the people around them. And that's really Governor Parson's job in the rules that he set down, is to protect other people around you. Same reason you shouldn't go 100 miles an hour going down the highway. It's not safe, not only to you, but to everyone around you. And people need to practice self-control. They need to be accountable for their actions.
So, Gina, there's a poll come out. Missourians approve of Governor Parson's handling this 2-1. I've approved of his handling of this,
right.
Especially when he's let local control happen where local places go. Sam Page in St. Louis County has a COVID-19 problem. There's a real problem in St. Louis, and he's a responsible leader. Lyda Crewson, very responsible leader, is acting like it. Robert Salmon in St. Clair County has 2 cases. You've had people in St. Clair County, you've told them since St. Patrick's Day, pandemic going to be bad, there's ventilators everywhere. Well, there's 2 cases in that county.
Right.
So why do you expect at some point, Missourians, you got to show me, right?
Right,
They've
absolutely.
been sitting waiting for this for 4 months now. I think like the governor extends his phase, maybe the phase for St. Clair County is to leave them alone.
Right. Well, the governor's done a great job. You know, we've talked about it before on the show how diverse the state is, and he's listened to local leaders just like he has on crime. I mean, he goes around, he talks to folks and finds out what's important in their areas and what's going to work in their areas. I think it's also important to note that many of these cases are in confined areas, nursing homes for one. So for the general public, it's something to consider, but it is important that we do follow the guidelines that the governor set forth to keep flattening the curve so we don't have this outbreak like they had in New York. Because that could happen here if people don't have some sense of responsibility, particularly.
So at what point can they actually go to the lake? Because this would, if this isn't 4th of July, you can make all the same arguments. I guess my point is, at some point, flatten the curve became stay in your basement until we find a cure, and that's not reality. Especially in places like you go to Oregon County, Texas County.
I absolutely agree. They've moved the goalposts, right? We have flattened the curve, and now they want nobody can leave the home until we have some sort of a cure. We don't know how long that's going to be. We can't give up our whole livelihoods and existence. I mean, we all know small business owners who are about to go out of business because they can't continue, and people who are losing their livelihoods, and the fact that people can't get healthcare now because they're afraid to go to the hospital for basic things or preventative things that are so important because they've been told not to show up, or now they've laid off nurses and doctors and we're going to have a shortage there again. So we've had this huge overreaction. There's no doubt about it. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't continue to take reasonable precautions, right? So they took some precautions down there. It looked bad, but it looked really bad on the beaches in Florida when there were all these people around, and we didn't see an outbreak there. So time will tell. We don't know what's going to happen. We'll find out. Hopefully these people are responsible enough that if they were being irresponsible, they're not going home to vulnerable populations like their grandparents or
She's
someone
such a
else.
good legislator when she was. Michael, let me just ask you the question. So at some point, I think Governor Parsons done a good job. When's the job done? I mean, these press conferences are turning into silly things where the liberals are going liberal and the governor's getting frustrated with it. All these phases. I mean, I think you've counseled governors. I've actually seen you counsel governors. At some point, you're going to lose credibility with people in rural Missouri because you've been telling them all these things are going to happen. You've been changing their lives, and there's been nothing happen. At some point, maybe instead of more phases, you just need to say, okay, we'll come back if there's a problem, because if there is a problem, you're going to have a very hard time in rural Missouri convincing people the second pandemic's coming when the first one never came.
Well, overreaction, I don't know how there could have been anything less than overreaction because there weren't enough hospital beds. There weren't enough nurses. There weren't enough doctors. When we hit the spike, the biggest spike that we've had, we're converting motels, gutting them to create more hospital beds and healthcare places in North County.
But we never needed them. I mean, Christian Hospital had 2 floors closed at the peak of this crisis because they didn't have enough people in there to fill the hospital. The census is low.
Right, we never needed them, but you still can't say it was overreacting because we didn't know. That's the whole problem with the pandemic.
I think that's a very good point. And I think people that want to be critical on the front end of this, nobody knew it was going to happen. But we're now in month 4 of this. You do have some ideas that there are nursing homes in certain populations that are susceptible. Then there are certain populations that might be carriers, but you know, who knows? I think you're entering a phase where that reasonable approach is now, I'm not sure, honestly, St. Louis County needs a second phase. I don't know that St. Clair County needs a second phase. And I do think you run a real risk that if, let's say hypothetically, let's say somebody has a pool party in Sedalia and it of course ends to the black plague that ends the world, no one's going to believe you till it's too late now if you continue to tell them, shut your restaurants down, do all these things when really there's nothing's materialized. Maybe you say good job and move on.
Well, I think the problem is right now, we don't know the effects of coconuts and the other bars at the lake. And I mean, Scott, what are we going to say if it's projected that there were 40,000 people there and then all of a sudden we have 24 deaths within the next 14 days? Then are people going to believe that, maybe we shouldn't do this?
I think reasonable people like myself would say, okay, that's a good data point, you're right. The problem I've seen is when Governor Parson reopened the state, oh my God, everyone's going to die. You read the editorials in the urban liberal papers, going to be death. Not true. You've seen, at every point, it seems like the only news that anybody cares about is news that's bad. the data that leads you to think good things is also real too.
But even though the governor started opening things up, you still didn't see people in grocery stores without masks. People who were out were social distancing. They were doing the right things. This last weekend, people did not do the right thing.
I wear a mask in Schnucks out of respect to Dave Cook and the UFCW employees, but I see most of the people in the Schnucks I go to that don't have masks.
Well, the one I go to, they do.
Salute.
Yeah, I wear a mask there too. My mom is a UFCW member. She's retired now, but I totally respect all the work they do and putting themselves at risk. I really appreciate Schnucks stepping up and what they've done to protect their employees as well as the rest of us. But back to Governor Parson, you know, it's like he's damned if you do, he's damned if you don't.
Absolutely.
So he moved the election 2 months. Other governors weren't able to do that. He moved the election to next week when we have a better handle on what's going on. We had an opportunity to prepare people, and now they're complaining that it's still not safe, blah, blah, blah. We have had the Secretary of State traveling all over, handing out PPE and making sure there's enough hand sanitizer at the polling places, and it's not good enough. It's not good enough. No matter what the governor does, the left is going to complain, and that's what you do when you're the party out of power.
Opposition, sure.
But when you look overall, 2/3 of people approve of how he's handling it, and that's pretty remarkable considering such a diverse state that we have. And I think it really shows his skill as a politician of someone who looks at all the different, and he doesn't overreact. A lot of these governors have overreacted, then they get pushed in a corner, like Whitmer up in Michigan. They're in a corner now, and then they just keep going and going, and now they're stuck and they can't get out. Whereas our governor has waited, responded appropriately, listened to experts, and just had an even hand, and that's why you see these high approval ratings, and that's why he's going to be reelected.
Let's talk about something that also I think is going to have some high approval rating, that's Medicaid expansion. I always think it's great when somebody says this wasn't a political decision. It was moved from the November ballot to the August ballot. I'm sure there's some reasons why. I think everybody probably knows that this is likely to pass. It was a political decision, though, right?
I don't think so. I think he's right that they need a lot of time to prepare if this passes financially. I mean, right now we don't even know what it's going to look like financially because of the tax situation and the lower revenues. Secondly, everyone thinks it's going to pass, but Missourians rejected the expansion of Obamacare not that long ago. So there is a lot of money on the passage side. There's not a lot of money on keeping it from passing.
Are you making a Cole Budweiser bet right here on This Week in Missouri Politics?
I think it's a toss-up.
I'll bet it passes. Mike Lewis, I think that since Governor McNair, governors have been putting things on the ballot when they thought it was politically advantageous for them. I think it happened again. I don't think it matters. They could have it on the municipal election. I think that with the amount of money on one side and no real organized opposition on the other, this is going to pass, right?
Yeah, there's not a lot of opposition. You're right. There's not a lot of money on the opposition side, and for good reason. I'm just glad people have quit calling Medicare and Medicaid Obamacare.
Oh, I don't think they've stopped, and I think that next spring when Cody Smith is chairing a budget meeting and there's a huge amount of money to pull from somewhere, I think you might even see educators calling it Obamacare because that's where this money's going to come from, right?
Well, we don't know where it's going to come from.
All right, let me ask you one question about this. I think that she didn't take my bet, but I will bet her this passes. I do believe the argument, especially in rural Missouri, over time, this is going to probably be a net positive Medicaid expansion, maybe even for the state budget. You know, the money that turns around an economy from healthcare. But in the first couple years, I've seen people that claim this is going to be revenue neutral. I don't buy that. Do you buy that?
It's really unpredictable. It depends on, a lot depends on what happens with the current situation with COVID. A lot of that, even though because...
Okay, so I'm smelling a bet. I'm betting you that it passes, and you're saying it won't. Beer for Scott. I'm betting you that it's not revenue neutral the first year, and are you betting that it is?
No, I'm not, because I'm concerned. I'm concerned about the amount of healthcare issues that we don't know could be coming, because I mean, we've had the issue with those poor babies that got that total rash all over them, and they think it could be from COVID-19. Now, if that starts spreading, and you know, especially in the poor neighborhoods and in the deprived neighborhoods, if that breaks out, you're going to see all hell break loose when it comes to having treatment.
But I'm getting a little skeptical of people attributing this to COVID-19. One thing that's not COVID-19 related was the end of session. Came through the last week. They passed some pretty large bills. But it was slow. I thought it was a very good job in the Senate how they allowed some things to move, but didn't just go on a huge gangbuster omnibus spree.
I agree that the Senate did a great job. I think that the House wasted taxpayers' dollars by even being there, big time. The floor leader was more interested in passing a law that says you can wear brass knuckles now, and it's not a weapon. That's ridiculous. And yet there were things that needed to be done with COVID, and he let it go. He didn't do anything to help, and he avoided controversial bills, but passed a brass knuckle bill. Now that's poor leadership.
Sometimes there's a reason there's a Missouri Senate, right?
This was a perfect example.
With a minute left, who won the week?
I will have to go with my Congresswoman Ann Wagner. She has done an excellent job during COVID. She's had many online town halls, and her staff there, I have people call me asking for help with things that have to do with federal issues, whether it's a veterans issue, Social Security. They go to Ann's office, they call Ann's office, and they take care of her. And I think that service is really going to serve her well in November. Voters are going to remember that.
Won the week?
Well, I got to go back to the last week of sessions since we didn't get to be here that week.
Sure.
I want to say Senator Gina Walsh won the week of that week, and she's won the last 8 years, and probably the 8 years before that when she was in the House. She's been a great statesman. She knows how to, when to hold them, when to fold them, so to speak, and she is a great legislator, and we are sorely going to miss her. Now, she's had a lot of support from people like Jill Shoup and Scott Sifton in the Republican side, even. So, you know, she just has been a great statesman. We're going to miss her, and congratulations to her for just an excellent 16 years of representing Missourians, and I know she's going to do well, continuing on doing a great job.
Everyone in the state owes her a debt of gratitude.
Yep.
I was going to say I was all fired up to go with Tony Helms, the Camden County Sheriff, but I'm going to tell you who I think won the week, honestly. It's you, Mike Lewis. You inherited the AFL-CIO, led it very well, brought it to a big rebound in the state, and I'm going to say your successor, Jay Kummel. It's one thing to do a good job in an organization, another thing to turn it over and leave it better than you found it. I think you certainly did that.
Thank you very much.
We'll see you back here next week on This Week of Missouri Politics with the House Minority Leader, Crystal Quaid.
This Week in Missouri Politics, sponsored by the Missouri Association of Career Fire Protection Districts, Spire, and Sterling Bank.
We just finished up this week's show, and I appreciate a second to tell you about a new thing we're doing. I'm a history buff, like I know a lot of you are if you watch the show. We're doing a thing of the history of Missouri. We're going to do it one county at a time. We call it Show Me Missouri. We're going to travel to all 114 counties of the state. We'll have a member of the Farm Bureau, county elected officials, some of your state legislators you see here on the show. We're going to talk about the history, what's happening now in the county, and how the two are interconnected. It's a passion project of mine. If you like history, I hope you'll get involved. Follow us. Go to MissouriTimes.com. You can see it. We'll probably branch it off into its own social media at some point. But you've been so good to us at the Missouri Times, the show, different papers. This is a passion project that I hope you'll enjoy. It's called Show Me Missouri, the history of Missouri, one county at a time. The first county was Polk County. We had a great time. And we hope you'll go to MissouriTimes.com, find a little bit about it. And if you like the history of the state, I hope you'll enjoy it.